Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we try to cut through all the noise, the marketing hype, and really dig into the dense technical stuff to bring you what actually matters.
That's the plan.
And today we are tackling, I think, one of the biggest questions, maybe one of the most frustrating ones for anyone looking at a new phone. Just how fast does the new iPhone 17 actually charge?
It's a huge topic, and we've got a ton of data here from some pretty exhaustive comparative tests. We're looking at the whole new iPhone 17 lineup. That's the Pro Max, the Pro, the standard one, and that interesting little E model.
Right, and we're putting them head-to-head with the competition. The big guns, Samsung's latest, Google's, Xiaomi, OPPO, the usual suspects.
Exactly, and our mission today, it's really focused. We've boiled it down to 3 core questions that you as a user probably have.
Okay, lay them out for us. What's the roadmap?
First, what is the real charging wattage? Not the number on the box, but the actual sustained power the iPhone 17 series can take. We need the truth on that.
Yeah, forget the peaks. What's the reality? Okay, second,
how does that translate to charging time? How does it stack up against those top-tier Androids? And we're not just looking at 0 to 100%, which can be a bit academic.
Right, we want to know about that crucial window, like the first 20 or 30 minutes, oh no, I forgot to charge my phone emergency top-up.
Precisely. That's often what matters day to day. And third, heat. Speed is great, but does it cook the phone? We need to look at temperature.
And specifically, we have to figure out what's going on with the iPhone E. Why is that one seemingly so much slower than the others in the lineup? There must be a reason.
There is, and we'll get into it. But before we dive into the numbers themselves, let's just touch on the methodology behind these tests we're drawing from. Important context.
Good point. How were these tests run?
So the sources emphasize this was designed to be very real world. The perspective wasn't like hardcore electrical engineers in a lab with oscilloscopes necessarily.
Okay.
It was conducted more from the viewpoint of a knowledgeable user, someone who wants practical, repeatable results you could actually get at home.
That's actually really useful. Less theoretical, more practical.
Exactly. And the conditions were super controlled to make sure the comparisons are fair. Every phone started at 0% charge, like fully shut down.
Okay, dead flat.
Dead flat. And charged straight through to 100% indicated, no messing around.
And the environment. That matters for heat, right?
Hugely. Yeah. All the charging happened in an air-conditioned room kept at a constant 26 degrees Celsius, so about 79 Fahrenheit.
Right, so external heat wasn't really a factor messing with the phone's own temperature readings.
Precisely. It isolates the heat generated by the charging itself. Now, here's a really key detail the chargers use.
Ah, yes. What were they plugging these phones into?
For all the iPhones, the new 17s, and the older 16 they used for comparison, the testers used a third-party setup, specifically a 140-watt Anker Zolo charger.
Okay, a pretty powerful, well-regarded charger.
Very much so. And paired with a high-spec 240-watt Anker Zolo cable. So basically, a robust, high-quality, non-Apple charging solution capable of delivering plenty of power.
Got it. What about the Android phones?
Ah, that's the contrast. For the Chinese Android phones, particularly the OPPO and Xiaomi, which are known for crazy fast charging.
The ones with like 100 W plus chargers in the box.
Exactly those. They were tested using their official proprietary high wattage charger that came with the phone.
Okay, that's a really important distinction. So we're comparing the iPhone using a top-tier standard charger against Androids using their own specialized, optimized systems.
Precisely. It's kind of the best available generic setup versus the highly optimized bespoke setup. Keep that in mind as we go through the results.
Definitely. Okay, let's get into it then. Section 1, the internal leap. We have to start by looking at how the iPhone 17 compares to its own predecessor, the 16 series, because the data suggests something pretty significant changed this year.
Oh, it's more than significant. It's like a fundamental shift, really. The sources are consistent. The iPhone 17 series charges substantially faster than last year's iPhone 16 Pro Max.
Okay, give us the headline number. How much faster are we talking for a full charge?
We're looking at the iPhone 17 Pro Max, hitting 100% up to 30 minutes faster than the 16 Pro Max.
30 minutes? Wow, that's not just shaving off a few minutes. That's a serious chunk of time.
It really is. Half an hour. Think about plugging your phone in before you have to dash out. That difference could be leaving with, say, 50% versus maybe 80%. It's tangible.
That's the kind of upgrade people actually feel in their daily lives, not just a number on a spec sheet. But You mentioned earlier the real magic might be in the early part of the charge. Tell us about the 50% mark.
Yeah, this is where the improvement is just incredibly stark and probably more valuable for most people. Apple actually claimed the 17 series could hit 50% in 20 minutes.
Which always sounds a bit optimistic, right? Manufacturer claims.
Usually, yeah. But the real world tests, even with that third-party Anchor charger, they basically back it up. The iPhone 17 standard, the Pro, and the Pro Max all hit that 50% battery level in a really tight range, somewhere between 20 and 23 minutes.
20 to 23 minutes to get halfway charged. Okay, now contrast that. How long did the previous model, the 16 Pro Max, take to reach that same 50% point?
This is where it gets almost painful. The old 16 Pro Max needed between 33 and 34 minutes to get to 50%.
Whoa. So we're talking, what, 10 to 14 minutes faster just for that first half?
Exactly. All that time saving is front-loaded into the most useful part of the charge.
So practically speaking, phone's dead, you're in a rush. Plug in a new iPhone 17 for just, say, 15 minutes.
And you're likely walking away with close to 50% battery, maybe just shy of it.
That's easily enough for half a day, maybe more, depending on your use. That changes everything in terms of battery anxiety.
Completely. It shifts the whole relationship. A dead iPhone used to mean a significant mandatory wait. Now it's more like a quick pit stop.
That ability to rely on short bursts of charging, that's maybe the single biggest practical win here.
I agree. And we'll dig into the why behind the sustained wattage in a bit. It's really interesting.
Okay. Before we compare outwards to Android, we need to address the odd one out in the Apple family, the iPhone E. The other 17 models seem to charge pretty close together, finishing around 77 to 80 minutes total. But the E...
Yeah, the iPhone E was the clear laggard within the Apple group. It took a noticeably longer 96 minutes to get to 100%, so just over an hour and a half.
96 minutes compared to under 80 for the others, that's quite a gap.
It is. We need to flag it now. It's the slowest of the bunch. The reasons are tied directly to its physical design, its size and thinness.
Okay, so it's a trade-off. We'll circle back to the Y on the E model when we talk about heat later on.
Exactly. But for now, just know, if you opt for the super slim light E model, slower charging is a part of the deal.
Got it. All right, let's pivot now. Section 2, the Android challenge. You can't talk iPhone charging speed without comparing it to the Android world, especially those super fast charging Chinese brands.
Absolutely not. And let's be clear up front. If your only metric is the absolute fastest time from 0 to 100%, Android, particularly certain brands, still wears the crown, no question.
They've been pushing insane wattages for years now with proprietary tech.
Right. And in these tests, the OPPO F8 Ultra was still the king. It achieved the full charge in, well, it's almost unbelievable, around 40 minutes.
40 minutes, 0 to 100. That's barely enough time to make a coffee and drink it. It's absurdly fast.
It really is. It shows a totally different engineering priority, pushing the absolute limits.
Okay, so OPPO is in its own league. What about the others? Xiaomi? Samsung?
The Xiaomi 15 Ultra and the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra were next up. They clocked in around 55 to 60 minutes for a full charge. Still very fast, obviously. 55
to 60 minutes. And the iPhone 17 Pro Max, we said, was around 77 to 80 minutes.
Correct. So on that total charge time metric, the iPhone is still significantly behind those three.
But wait, there was another Android in the mix, wasn't there? Google's Pixel.
Ah, yes. Good point. The Google Pixel 10 Pro XL was also tested, and it was actually the slowest of the entire flagship group.
Slower than the iPhone 17 Pro Max.
Yep. The Pixel took about 98 minutes to reach 100%.
98 minutes. So the iPhone 17 Pro Max at 77-80 minutes is actually faster than Google's flagship.
That's right. So Apple has at least climbed out of the absolute bottom spot in the flagship charging speed race, which is, something. A small victory, maybe.
Okay, but as we discussed, that 0-100% time isn't always the most relevant thing. Let's shift focus back to that practical emergency charging window, the first 20 to 30 minutes.
This is where the story gets really interesting and much better for Apple. When you zoom in on that I need power NOW scenario, the gap between the iPhone 17 Pro Max and the non-Chinese Androids practically disappears.
Okay, break it down. What happened after 20 minutes of charging?
After just 20 minutes, the iPhone 17 Pro Max had reached about 45% battery.
45% in 20 minutes. That's solid. How did that compare to the Samsung and Xiaomi?
That's the key. It was almost identical. The Galaxy S25 Ultra and the Xiaomi 15 Ultra were also right around that mid-40s% mark after 20 minutes. They were all clustered very tightly together.
Wow. So neck and neck in that first crucial phase, only the OPPO was way ahead at that point.
Exactly. Only the OPPO with its super high wattage proprietary system had pulled significantly ahead by the 20-minute mark.
Okay, now push it out another 10 minutes. What about after 30 minutes of charging?
After 30 minutes, the iPhone 17 Pro Max's charge percentage was, for all practical purposes, level with the Xiaomi 15 Ultra.
Level.
And it was only slightly behind the Samsung S25 Ultra. Maybe, 5% difference, something quite minimal in the grand scheme of things.
This really changes the narrative, doesn't it? For those quick top-ups, the kind most people actually need during the day.
The iPhone 17 series is now genuinely competitive with the big players like Samsung. The difference is negligible in that critical first half hour.
And that's achieved, remember, with the iPhone using a standard high-quality third-party charger, while the Samsung and Xiaomi were using their own optimized in-box chargers.
That's a crucial point. Apple closed that gap significantly, even without resorting to a fully proprietary high-wattage system like OPPOs.
Yeah.
It's a big step up in user convenience for those midday boosts.
It's absolutely fascinating. Which brings us perfectly into Section 3. Let's get technical. This is the wattage deep dive. We need to understand the sustained power curve, because that seems to be the secret sauce behind these speed improvements.
It absolutely is. Looking at the charging curve data, the graph of wattage over time, that tells the real story. So for the iPhone 17 Pro and the Pro Max,
Yeah.
the power ramped up very quickly and hit a peak wattage of around 35 to 36 watts.
Okay, 35, 36 watts max. Now, hold on. I seem to remember the 16 Pro Max could also briefly hit around 35 watts, couldn't it?
You are absolutely right. It could.
So if the peak wattage isn't really any higher, how on earth is the phone charging 30 minutes faster? That doesn't add up.
This is the single most important finding from these tests. It's not about the height of the peak, it's about the duration, the quality of that peak power delivery.
Explain that.
The old iPhone 16 Pro Max, yes, it could hit 35 watts, but only for like a very short moment, as the sources put it. A tiny fleeting burst, then the power dropped quickly.
Okay, like a quick sprint, then immediately slowing down.
Exactly. The new iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max, however, while peaking around the same level, managed to sustain power above 30 watts for a much, much longer time.
And how long was that duration of sustained high power?
It consistently held above 30 watts for pretty much the first 30 minutes of the charge.
The first 30 minutes, that maps perfectly onto why it hits 50% so much faster.
Bingo. That's the core upgrade. It's not a higher peak wattage. It's this dramatically improved endurance at high wattage right at the start of the charge. They reinforced the sprint.
So the phone is just gulping down energy at a high, steady rate during the initial, most receptive phase of the battery charging cycle. It spends less time later on charging at slower, trickier rates.
Precisely. It front loads the work much more effectively.
What likely changed inside the phone to allow this? Better battery chemistry, better cooling.
The sources don't have teardowns, but logically, yes, it has to be improvements in both. The battery chemistry likely needs to be more robust to accept that sustained high power without excessive stress or degradation.
Okay.
And crucially, there must be significantly improved thermal management inside. Better heat sinks, maybe larger vapor chambers, something that allows the charging circuitry and battery to stay cooler for longer under that high load.
Right, giving it more headroom before it's forced to throttle back the power due to heat. That makes sense. That's where the real engineering effort likely went.
Absolutely. Now let's contrast that with the Android side, specifically the Samsung S25 Ultra, to see why it still wins the overall 0-100% race, even if the iPhone keeps up early on.
Okay, how does the S25 Ultra's power curve look different?
Well, the S25 Ultra did hit a slightly higher peak, getting up towards 40 watts, but again, the main difference is endurance, just later in the cycle.
That's it.
The Samsung phone managed to sustain its power above 30 watts for a noticeably longer period than the iPhone 17 Pro Max did. It didn't drop off as sharply after that initial 30-minute mark.
Okay. So while the iPhone might be dropping down towards, say, 10 watts after 40 minutes or so.
The Samsung might still be pulling 20 or 25 watts at that same point in time. It keeps the pedal down harder for longer into the middle stages of the charge.
And that difference, accumulated over the second half of the charge, explains why it finishes in 55-60 minutes versus the iPhone's 77-80.
Exactly. Samsung often uses physically larger batteries and sometimes more aggressive cooling solutions like those big vapor chambers you hear about. That gives them a bit more thermal runway to delay the throttling compared to Apple's typical design constraints.
Gotcha. Okay, what about the standard iPhone 17, not the Pro models? How did its power curve behave?
The standard 17 also showed a big improvement over previous standard models, but it was regulated a bit more conservatively than the Pros. It maintained a strong wattage, somewhere between 27 and 30 watts, for a solid 20 minutes before it started to step down its power intake.
20 minutes around 27-30 watts. Still much better than before, but not quite the 30 minutes above 30 watts that the Pro models managed.
Correct. The Pro models clearly get that extra bit of sustained high power capability, which helps them shave off those extra minutes on the total charge time.
Okay, that clarifies the lineup differences. Now, before we leave wattage, you mentioned something intriguing earlier, this idea of the phantom full charge indication on iPhones. What's that about?
Yeah, this is a neat little detail the testers observed, and it's good for users to understand. When your iPhone screen finally ticks over to, say, 100%.
Yeah, it's done, right? Time to unplug.
Well, not quite. Electrically speaking, it hasn't fully finished the charging process.
Yeah.
The 100% indication is more like saying, okay, I'm full enough for you to use now.
So what's actually happening inside the phone after it shows 100%?
It switches into what's called trickle charging. It continues to feed the battery a very low amount of power. The test measured it around just 1 watt.
1 watt? Tiny. Why bother?
It's all about battery health and maximizing the true capacity. This trickle charge phase helps to balance the cells within the battery pack and ensures it's truly saturated without overstressing it. Stopping abruptly right when it hits the 100% threshold isn't ideal for longevity.
So leaving it plugged in for maybe another 10-15 minutes after it hits 100% is actually beneficial.
Potentially, yes. It's letting the phone complete that final delicate balancing act. It's a reminder that the number on the screen is a user convenience, while the underlying engineering is a bit more nuanced.
Fascinating stuff. Okay, so we know the phones can take the power, especially sustained power. And we know the testers used a third-party anchor charger to achieve these great results for the iPhone. Which leads us directly into Section 4, the AVS charger mystery. Because Apple does sell its own rather expensive 40-watt charger, and they push this new standard called AVS. We need to figure out what AVS is, and critically, if you actually need it.
Yes, this has definitely been a point of confusion. AVS stands for Adaptive Voltage Supply. It sounds fancy, sounds advanced. The big question is, does it actually make a difference in speed?
Okay, let's try and simplify the tech. What's the basic difference between the old standard everyone uses, power delivery or PD, and this new Apple AVS system? How do they work differently?
Think of standard power delivery, like PD 3.0 or 3.2, as having fixed gears or maybe fixed steps on a staircase. The charger and phone negotiate and agree on specific voltage levels, typically 5 volts, 9 volts, 15 volts, or 20 volts.
Okay, set levels.
Right. When phone needs more power, it basically requests the next step up. Now, AVS is different. AVS is more like a smooth ramp or a dimmer switch instead of just on-off clicks. It allows the charger and the phone to constantly talk to each other and finally adjust the voltage in tiny little increments. We're talking millivolts.
So instead of jumping from 15 volts straight to 20 volts, AVS could smoothly slide through 15.1V, 15.2V, 15.3V, and so on.
Exactly. Continuously optimizing the voltage second by second to precisely match what the battery can best handle at that exact moment in its charge state.
Okay, theoretically, that sounds like it should be better. More precise control could mean less wasted energy as heat, potentially allowing slightly faster charging overall, maybe better for battery health long term.
That's the theory, yes. It's very sophisticated. But it also requires very specific, complex charging chips and communication protocols on both the charger and the device side.
Which is probably why most third-party charger makers haven't rushed to implement AVS. It's complicated and maybe proprietary or expensive.
That seems to be the case. And this led to the worry among users. Oh no, to get these new faster iPhone 17 speeds, do I have to buy Apple's special expensive 40-watt AVS park?
Right. So we have the sophisticated theory versus the actual real-world test results. What happened when the testers directly compared charging the iPhone 17 with Apple's official 40W AVS charger versus that high-quality third-party Anker PD charger?
This is the killer finding, and it's been backed up by other tech reviewers and testing labs too. The real-world speed difference was minimal. Shockingly minimal.
How minimal are we talking?
They look specifically at the charge level after 20 minutes, that crucial emergency window again. The difference in battery percentage between using the Apple AVS charger and the standard Anker PD charger was just 1%.
1%. It's like 45% versus 46%. That's basically nothing in practical terms. It's within the margin of error.
Pretty much. It seems that the major speed gains we saw in the iPhone 17 series, that ability to sustain over 30 watts for 30 minutes, come from the phone's internal improvements. the battery management system, the thermals.
Not from the fancy AVS communication protocol on the charger itself.
It appears not, or at least the benefit is negligible in practice. The phone itself is capable of asking for and handling that sustained high power, and a good quality modern power delivery charger, specifically PD 3.2 or higher with PPS support, is perfectly capable of supplying it efficiently.
So the bottleneck isn't the charger communication protocol, it's the phone's ability to safely dissipate heat while taking in that power.
That seems to be the limiting factor. AVS might be slightly more efficient on paper, but it doesn't translate into a noticeable speed boost you'd ever perceive.
Okay, so the clear takeaway for anyone listening is save your money. Do not feel obligated to buy Apple's expensive 40-watt AVS charger.
Absolutely. Grab any reputable third-party charger that explicitly supports power delivery 3.2 or newer, ideally with PPS, programmable power supply capabilities, and make sure it's rated for at least 40 watts or more. You'll get effectively the same charging speed, you won't harm your phone, and you'll keep quite a bit more cash in your pocket.
That is fantastic practical advice, a huge relief for many, I'm sure. Okay, let's move to our final section, Section 5, heat management, and looping back to explain the iPhone E's limitations.
Right, heat. The perpetual enemy of fast charging and long-term battery health. Get too hot, and the phone has to slam on the brakes, reducing charging speed to protect itself.
Given that the new iPhones are sustaining higher power for longer, how did they actually fare in terms of temperature during these demanding tests? Did they get worryingly hot?
Surprisingly, no. The thermal management seems really well tuned. Remember, this was in a controlled 26 degrees C room. Under those conditions, the peak surface temperature recorded on the iPhone 17 series phones was consistently between 38 and 40 degrees Celsius.
38 to 40 C, so noticeably warm to the touch, definitely, but not alarmingly hot, not uncomfortable to hold.
Exactly. Warm, yes, but not concerningly hot. It suggests Apple found a good balance. They pushed the speed up significantly, but not so aggressively that it creates excessive heat.
It fits their philosophy, doesn't it? They often prioritize longevity and a balanced experience over hitting the absolute maximum spec number if it comes with compromises like extreme heat.
Precisely. It's fast enough to be competitive and convenient now, especially in that initial phase, without going into that whoosh fast territory of some Androids that can push 45 degrees C or even higher, which definitely raises questions about long-term battery degradation.
Okay, so the mainline iPhones handle the heat well. Now let's finally solve the mystery of the iPhone E. It took 96 minutes to charge, much slower than the others. Why did Apple deliberately restrict its speed?
It comes down purely to physics and the phone's physical design. The whole appeal of the iPhone E is meant to be its thinness and lightness.
Yeah.
It's the most compact model.
Yeah, for people who prioritize portability above all else.
But when you make a phone significantly thinner and smaller, you drastically reduce the internal volume and the surface area available for dissipating heat.
Less metal, less space for heat sinks or vapor chambers, less ability for heat to actually escape the device.
Exactly. You simply can't fit the same robust thermal management system that's in the larger Pro or even the standard iPhone 17 into that smaller E chassis. It's physically impossible.
So if they had allowed the iPhone E to try and pull the same 30-35 watts as its bigger siblings,
it would likely overheat very quickly. The internal temperature would spike, and the phone's safety systems would immediately throttle the charging speed way down anyway, probably even slower than its current limit.
So Apple preemptively capped its charging power to prevent that overheating scenario from ever happening.
That's the necessary engineering decision they had to make. The tests showed the iPhone E peaked at maybe 27 watts very briefly, but for most of its charge cycle, it was operating much lower, down in the 18 to 20 watt range.
18 to 20 watts compared to the standard 17 holding 2730W and the Pros holding over 30W for that first half hour. That explains the huge difference in charge time.
It does. The slower charging speed on the E isn't some artificial limitation to push you to buy a more expensive model. It's a direct consequence of the laws of thermodynamics applied to a very small, thin device.
It's the fundamental trade-off. You want maximum portability and lightness with the E. You have to accept significantly slower charging as part of that package.
That's the deal. The upside is, because it charges slower, the iPhone E actually stays remarkably cool during charging. It only gets slightly warm during the first 30-40 minutes, and is pretty cool after that. So you get great temperature management, but at the cost of speed. Users have to decide if that trade-off works for them.
That makes perfect sense. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground, from sustained wattage to AVS myths to thermal limits. This has been incredibly insightful. Let's try and wrap it up by summarizing the absolute key takeaways people need to remember from this deep dive.
Okay, 3 main points. Takeaway number 1. iPhone 17 series charging is genuinely substantially faster than the 16 series. Not because of a higher peak wattage number, but because it can sustain high power over 30 watts for the pros for that critical first 30 minutes. That's the real upgrade.
Got it. Sustained power is king. Takeaway number 2.
The speed gap for emergency charging, that crucial 20 to 30 minute top up between the new iPhones and the major non-Chinese Android flagships like Samsung, has essentially closed. They are now very competitive in that scenario, which gives you great confidence for quick power boosts.
Excellent news for practical use. And the third takeaway.
Third, the phones manage the heat from this faster charging really well, staying within a reasonable temperature range around 40 degrees C, which is good for battery health. And crucially, for your wallet. You absolutely do not need to buy Apple's expensive 40-watt AVS charger. A good quality standard PD 3.2 charger will give you the same speed.
Fantastic. Save money, get the same speed. Love it. This whole analysis really hammers home the point about peak numbers versus sustained performance, doesn't it?
It really does. And that leads perfectly into the final provocative thought we wanted to leave everyone mulling over.
Go on.
These tests prove pretty definitively that obsessing over huge peak wattage numbers, 60W, 80W, 100W plus, can be incredibly misleading if that power is only available for a few seconds before throttling kicks in.
Right. The iPhone 17 Pro Max showed that achieving a moderate peak but holding it for a long time delivers massive real-world benefits.
Exactly. So the question we want to pose to you, the listener, is this. Now that Apple has shifted the focus and shown the power of sustained delivery, should we as consumers and reviewers maybe stop paying so much attention to those peak wattage marketing numbers altogether?
And instead,
maybe the only metric that truly matters for charging speed is, for how long can a device maintain a genuinely high level of power, let's say, consistently above 30 watts before heat forces it to throttle back? Shouldn't that duration be the key spec we compare?
the endurance rating, not just the sprint speed.
Precisely, because that duration is what truly dictates your real-world charging experience and utility. Something to think about next time you see a charger boasting a giant wattage number.
A really powerful thought to end on. Brilliant analysis. Thank you for breaking all that down for us. That's all the time we have for this deep dive.
My pleasure.
We'll catch you next time.
If you enjoy this video, please like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell to the later update from my channel. Thank you for watching till the end, and see you in the next video.